Well, analyst and researcher on gender and cultural issues, Nomboniso Gasa joins us to share her experience on the militarization of African universities following the visuals we brought you this evening. Good to see you again, Nomboniso. Lots of calls for a shutdown of universities. Some of the UKZN students saying they will not have lectures going on, until possibly the beginning of next year. The Minister Bladen Zimande himself saying it's the safest thing to do. I support the shutdown of universities, but what could the consequences of it be?
Well, firstly, I wish that South Africa actually looked at other African countries and actually looked at what is it that we can learn from the countries on this continent. University shutdown has been done before a number of times. It's a terrible thing to do. And once you start doing that, you actually destroy the very culture of the university.
Talk us through your experience. You were in Nigeria post a coup. What was it like being at an institution?
Well, by the time I was in Nigeria, they had already gone through different cycles of having universities shut down. And also in other countries, in Francophone countries as well. So when I was there, it was almost like, that's what you do. When you can't control a situation on campus, when there's boycott, when the lecturers, the academics are going on strike, you do a shutdown. And alongside that comes an incredibly militarized university. They used the military, they also used paramilitary, that is private institutions and all that, private security companies. They also, you also find that there are a group of students that become militaristic, at times on their own, because the whole environment is very, and they start this reign of terror against other students in the university. It can be either way. It can be in support of the strike, it can be against the strike. And also you find you find a degree that is supposed to be finished in 3 years, that people will be at university because of shutdowns, because they don't get to sit down for exams, because they don't finish the academic year. So you find that somebody can be there for 7 to 8 years doing a junior degree. And once you get there, once you start, a university shutdown actually sends so many signals. One of the signals it sends is that as an institution, as an autonomous institution in society, we are no longer able as a university community to deal with these issues. The second thing is that once politicians start dictating to universities what they should do, they are one step close to imposing the kind of university leadership that they want. Anybody who's favored by politicians, and we've seen this in many countries on the continent. Now, what is important in South Africa is that if this is considered as perhaps a cooling off period, that therefore there's a clear message that is sent that it's a cooling off period. And what does that mean? What is going to be achieved by that? But I think it's a very, very unwise thing to do. I think there are very serious issues around safety on campus. There are very serious issues around universities that have to be sitting for exams, students that are supposed to be writing, people that are supposed to be graduating, all those kinds of things. They're fundamentally, what universities are dealing with is the consequence of low budget allocation. This country spends 0.5%. That's under 1% of budget allocation for education. That's a very low, by all measures. But I think going back to the shutdown, when a minister of education, when student leaders call for a university shutdown, they themselves, the student leaders, in fact, are saying we don't want to negotiate, are saying we're willing to sacrifice this year. They've not asked other students, they've not asked society. And part of what is interesting, but also terribly disturbing about this is that all of us who are not directly involved at university, are watching and feeling helpless because it is happening at university. And we think that it's happening outside. But once you start those kinds of responses, it's going to happen everywhere. We've already seen, some kind of military intervention, not quite military, but very inappropriate intervention, use of force in parliament. So gradually you get into a society that is not using the instruments that it should be using. I think one of the things that we need to agree on as South Africans is that the crisis that we see at universities is a mirror of the crisis that we have in the society, and that we need to explore choices. But shutdown of universities, it's a very dangerous move.
Nomboniso, what do you do? I mean, we're looking at these visuals right now of what is happening at Rhodes. There were some students who did want to study. There were other students who say, no, this is a social justice issue, and therefore lectures should be put on hold so that education can be free to the poor. Both of them have an equally legitimate stance. And there we have the police intervening at this point because the frustration has boiled over. What do you do in this kind of situation? What's the next step?
But part of it also is that, so as South Africans, we have not invested in other ways of resolving deadlock. We, in the early years post 1994, we invested a lot in creating forums to actually, converse and thrash things out, and somehow we went back to the kind of apartheid era culture of militarized responses. So that's part of what you see. The second thing that is very clear is that the state actually is indifferent, right? We can no longer run away from the fact that the state is indifferent. So what is increasingly happening in this country is that unless you come up, you ban things, unless you destroy, it's only then that you will get attention. And I think it's tragic. So what do we do in this situation? I think firstly, the president must be present. He must actually lead the society. He must address the nation. He must actually declare that we have a crisis, and they better have a road map in terms of how this crisis is going to be dealt with, and invite other people in society, other leaders, faith leaders, a whole range of people to start dealing with this. Because even if you say, okay, let's suspend the academic program for 3 weeks, what are you going to achieve? You're going to open and then you're going to find the same thing. So there has to be a serious working through that is non-militarist.